Well, another weekend has been survived. All of us, no, half of us are in really rude good health, and half of us are suffering from a heavy cold. How is your cold
But sure,
today, Pat?
Grant actually is much better today, Jude.
Yeah.
Over the weekend, I really was feeling rotten. There's nothing worse than sneezing nonstop, and like the nose was running faster than the foil. So there you go.
What vividly you put it, Pat. But
No.
presumably not at the same volume.
I have a way with words.
Okay, well, we'll keep
Right.
this short then so you can retire to your sick bed with a hot toddy as soon as possible.
Not done you.
And when I say hot toddy, I mean a drink now, okay? Uh, right. There's an article in today's Irish Times by Breeda O'Brien. Now, it might have been there for weeks for all I know, but I noticed it this morning. And in it, she talks about this thing about um, assisted dying. It's becoming very, well, maybe it's always been there, but it's certainly out in the open now. And there's countries that are saying we really should have laws, and some have laws that do assist dying. Like a friend of mine in Canada was telling me that a guy I knew, one of the people we talked with, I had some incurable disease, but he would have been a contemporary of ours. And he traveled to whatever province, or maybe even he went to Sweden or somewhere. But anyway, he went with the assisted dying. Now, I remember being on a radio show one time, and this topic came up, and I said there was a doctor on, and he was talking about assisting people to die, and I says, "You mean you're helping to kill them?" And he nearly hit the roof. But I'm not sure if that wasn't a bit insensitive of me. Breeda O'Brien predictably comes down on the side of not having assisted dying. Uh, and she also sort of links that with what they call suicide assurance. Oh, no, suicide assistance. I don't know what the
Yeah.
difference is. But anyway, what's your own thinking, Pat? Do you think people who are, say, incurably possessed by some illness and who have no prospect of getting better, uh, should they be assisted to die?
Judah, it's like everything, and I'm always totally conflicted with this. I do think if you've got a terminal illness and you're in terrible pain, and and you're in sort of what would you say, compos mentis,
Hmm.
and there are doctors who say, look, there's not a hope in hell of a recovery here. And you know, I think people in those circumstances should have a choice. Where I diverge is, see, when you start going down this road, then do you start sort of knocking off people who have dementia because they're, whatever? And I see some of this stuff as well. They're saying there are people who can be, if your spouse is dying, but you're perfectly well. This guy had come over. What was his name? Philip
XG.
Nicheski or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's a very liberal. If your spouse is dying and you want to die with them, even though you're perfectly fine, healthy wise, he says that should be accommodated as well. And I'm going, not on your Nelly. Can you imagine the pressure some people would be under? Oh, you'll have to commit suicide when I'm going as well, or
Uh-huh.
or assisted dying.
Uh-huh.
Jude, I am in favor of the choice being for the person who's terminally ill, and that's it.
Uh-huh. Have you ever come across a case of somebody where a couple where one of them was healthy and they committed a joint suicide? Not commit. You're not supposed to use that word anymore. But they both took their own lives together. You ever come across that?
And Jude, there was a guy years and years ago. I think he was an American actor called Gig Young. He had a terminal illness, but his wife, as far as, or vice versa, I'm not sure. I'm talking about maybe 40 years ago. I
Yeah.
remember reading at the time they went together. They said that one couldn't live without the other. No, and that's only Hollywood stuff, so it could be total no bollocks. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But there was a case. There was a very famous case. A woman. She was originally from Donegal. She got motor neuron, and anyway, remember a big cause celeb in Dublin. In fact, her partner wrote a book about it afterwards. Like, she wanted the right to end her own life. She said like the existence was atrocious, and you know that other thing, the locked in syndrome, where you can't speak and you can't, like, I don't know, Jude. It's one of those areas I am never sure of. I think, Jude, if I was in pain and I had terminal illness, and I think maybe I would like the choice. But one final thing, there was a young fella I know in fact, it's inside my family circle, but I'll not bother naming. His mother was dying from cancer, and he says the last 2 or 3 days of her life was absolutely horrific, horrible beyond belief. And he says, if I could have done something to ease her pain, I would have. No, and by the way, it was done out of love, not out of some sort of stupidity. He said it was unbelievable watching his mother suffering.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be really quite horrible. The answer that Breed O'Brien comes up with is that there should be an increase in support of palliative care, where people are like hospices provide palliative care, where they provide cocktail of drugs or whatever, so that the pain is minimized. And they seem to do. I don't know if you're familiar with the Derry Hospice, the Foyle Hospice, but I was in it for a period of time. There's a guy I knew there, and I was really impressed by the work they were doing. The people. I didn't see people in terrible pain. There were people clearly fragile. There were people clearly moving to the end of their days. But somehow or another, they had got the pain so on under control. With regard to joint suicide, a colleague that I worked with, a woman, well, I didn't work side by side with her, but she was working in an apartment near to us. Her husband or her partner developed cancer, terminal cancer, and they both took their own lives in a car, like in his car. And she was totally healthy. And her colleague said that shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have happened. That was wrong. She had she was healthy. Of course, she would grieve at the loss of her partner, but that to take her a perfectly healthy life was wrong. It's so hard to know, isn't it? Like, why do people want the right to have suicide? Because, you or I, whether there's a right or not, you or I can, if we want to commit suicide, you can walk in front of a bus or you can jump off a bridge or whatever. Why do you
but the thing about it, Jude, if your partner or my partner or a friend is dying and they're in pain, they can choose to commit suicide. But if we take their own lives, maybe suicide's the wrong term. But what I call but if you give them something, you're helping them commit a crime, or you are committing a crime. So that's where when there's active intervention.
Well, you see, the thing that would worry me is, and it worries me more and more the older I get, is older people would or sick people would see themselves as a burden, which they are. Of course they are. Of course, sick people are a burden. I mean, they have to be tended to. They have to be looked after. They have to be fed sometimes, and God knows what. But that's the nature of sickness, that you need assistance from others. There's a line in a Bob Dylan song, which Forever Young, I'm sure you're familiar with it, where he says, may you always do for others and let others do for you.
Others do for you.
You see, I think that's an extremely wise couple of lines, especially the second one. Find it hard sometimes to allow people to look after us because we feel guilty. And there's no doubt about it. I know older people who, they wouldn't think of taking their own lives, but they do feel that they're a burden on their children. And I think that's a terrible pity, because look at it the other way around. Like I said this before, they were dependent on you when they were young, and you did everything for them. It might be easier to change a baby's nappy than to wipe an aging adult's bum, but it's the same principle, really.
That is surely,
So are we up a blind alley here?
I think, Jude, someone today, as long as the human race exists, there'll always be a controversy about the whole idea of assisted dying, because I don't think it's an open and shut case that one side can come down and say we're 100% right. Either side can come down and say they're 100% right. I think there are cases where you could argue it cogently, and there are others where you could say it's open to abuse, and you can argue it either way from either side and be right and be wrong.
I think, of course, there's a lot of grey areas too, because at present, I'm pretty sure that doctors recommend drugs for people who are dying, and they know that will maybe come with a price which will hasten the end of their days. But
wasn't there a member of the royal family? They wanted him to die in the evening so they could put it in the London Times the next morning. So the doctors gave him a cocktail of drugs so he'd die during the day, and they could announce it in the Times in the morning. That's actually apparently a true story.
That's sort of obscene, isn't it? Doesn't it seem a bit obscene?
It's about 100 years ago, whoever it was, I don't remember.
I mean, maybe in practice, it doesn't matter either. But if the person's going to die anyway, but somehow that really does seem where you're taking into account and allowing to predominate outer things.
Yeah.
There's nothing centrally
Yeah.
to do with it. Anyway, it's a very cheerful topic on a Monday morning, I must say. Okay, let's change to have a look at another cheerful topic, and that's an article in the Irish Times saying a dysfunctional Northern Ireland makes a united Ireland more attractive. Does that, would you go along with that? I mean, would you say the more this is a
Absolutely,
case, the better?
Yeah. Sam McBride, who I regard as a very good journalist, had a thing yesterday in the Sunday Independent. I saw it on social media, not in the actual paper. But there was talks between the guy whose name is Tony, one of the founding members of the DUP, and what I call him, Davy Adams. It's the two former hardline type loyalists who are now willing to consider a united Ireland. And the other thing as well, Jude, I think Jamie Bryson and Jim Allister are two of the best friends any unity campaign could have, because as long as they keep encouraging the DUP to keep going down the line they're going, they're alienating anybody that's moderate. And by the way, the growth of undecideds apparently in the unionist community last year, there was 33% or something like that who said they could not in any capacity suffer or stomach a United Ireland. Now it's down to 23%. And I think the role of the DUP has helped soften those people. They're probably saying anything's better than this.
Yeah.
So I think the whole idea that a dysfunctional Northern Ireland does help the concept of Irish unity.
Well, true enough, if you're in a hole and you can see there's a way out of this hole, and that might be by joining the EU via a united Ireland. I see that. This is an article by Pat Leahy in the Irish Times that we're talking about. I tend to, I mean, it's very interesting for the figures he's seeing. Like last year was this, and now they're softening more towards United Ireland. But I'm a bit worried because Pat Leahy in that article emphasizes that there's no question of them, i.e. the Irish Times, having any skin in this game. That their job simply is to lay the facts in front of all and sundry. I take that with a huge pinch of salt, because if you're the person who's laying out the facts, you're then in charge of the framework within which people will see this. And then once you set the framework, you can say, well, there's no point in talking about that because it's not part of what we have in mind here. And I think these continual, I think we maybe mentioned this before, but I think these continual figures about the number of people who like a united Ireland, like tomorrow or whenever, I just think that's doing a disservice. What's the point in talking about something that you won't be in a position to really judge properly in maybe 5 years' time? I mean, you'll need, I think you'll need a citizens' assembly or the equivalent before you'd be able to answer the question intelligently.
There's always that contradiction. God explain to me. They said, only what's 51% are in favor of what do you call it, the maintaining the union, and only 30% want a united Ireland. Well, I'll explain it away. Is Sinn Féin and the SDLP, are they sort of pro-union parties? Because their votes are growing, well, particularly Sinn Féin. I know. So are those people who vote Sinn Féin and the SDLP, and maybe even some who vote Alliance, who could well be in favour? Now, how does that stack up then in favour of the union? Because I think the contradiction is that, see, when it comes to the whipping of the crutches somewhere down the line, and the choice is either you vote for unity or you vote. A lot of people who are now sitting on a fence say, "Oh, hey, come on!" I genuinely believe more and more will go for unity, because what the Northern Ireland, as the contempt with which London is treating Northern Ireland is clearly visible to even a blind man on a galloping horse. It's so obvious.
Yeah, well, it's something they've sort of earned themselves by the way they've dealt with the Tory party. I mean, you don't stick it to the Tory party once or twice and then expect them to be still your good pal. They remember. They lest we forget, they remember. I'm Yeah, I still have that feeling that we should be pressing more. We do not say, Pat, should we not, every paper should be addressing the question, do we need a citizens' assembly? For example, they're setting up a citizens' assembly, and I think it's worth doing, looking at the Constitution in terms of the woman's place being in the home, which sounds daft.
Yeah.
There you go. Women do most of the work about home anyway. But they're addressing that, and they get the citizens' assembly to tell them all what they need to know. But they're not prepared to do, they haven't so far even considered, as far as I know, the idea of a citizens' assembly about a United Ireland. And I'd say there's more people talking about a United Ireland pro or con, for or against, than there are talking about what is the constitutional position on the place of the woman. Should she be the woman in the home or a woman somewhere else?
Since Brexit in what 2016, uh, you go into any conversation, a political conversation, and the union or unity come up, and how it's changed. Even as I was saying to Jude, the last time I was out in Spain, I met a wee English woman, and she was all up in arms. She says, "Oh, they didn't tell us." No, she had been living in Spain, but because she hadn't joined the tax system out there and all the rest of it, now under this new Brexit legislation, you can stay 90 days, but you have to go out for 90 days and you can't come back for the 90 days. So, in other words, her holiday or her home in Spain is now no every after 90 days, legally she has to leave. And if she doesn't, Jude, she can be fined for all sorts of tax things and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, there's all sorts of implications. And the other thing as well, Jude, as you rightly pointed out, there should be some sort of citizens forum set up to investigate all this. I think, the Irish government is doing this softly, softly. Dude, it says what 51% want to remain, 30 something percent want Irish unity, and they said it's highly unlikely that there'll be any border pool this side of this decade because
That's right.
the conditions or the criteria has not been met. Love to know who makes these decisions, dude. Because see tomorrow morning, if Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil, the SDLP actually got out there and started selling Irish unity, love to know how quickly that would change.
Well, even before that, Pat, I'd be in favour of the some sort of forum that would be given the funds and the sort of invitation to check out and establish firmly what the possible forms a United Ireland might take. Then we'd be looking at something concrete. I have a fear of following the Brexit path, where people voted for something that seemed emotionally a very hugely good idea, and for many of the majority. And then everybody knows in Britain, well, except for some very dumb people, that Brexit was a disaster, and we're still suffering from it. And the only way you'll get better from that is by sort of finding a way in unofficially to work in parallel with the EU. So the reason for that is because nobody told them what Brexit was going to be about. We shouldn't even dream of making the same mistake. And I'm astonished at journalists like Pat Leahy and others who are prepared to discuss and examine carefully the entrails of various pieces of research about who favours a United Ireland and who doesn't, that they don't address this question of, wouldn't it be a good idea to tell people what you're talking about when you're asking them a question? Is that a deliberate ploy, do you think, Pat, or is it just they never thought of it?
I'm not sure, Jude, because
you're a very kind Pat.
no, it is, Jude. No, what I sit and watch. I think partition failed in the north and succeeded in the south. Really, genuinely do. Like a lot of people down south have nearly see the border. The one that runs from Muff and Donegal right around to wherever it is, Newry. I think they see it almost like the Atlantic Ocean. I think a lot of people down south, from Laois and Carlow, never ever been across the border. Never. And there's almost a mindset. Oh, they're British up there. So I think the bigger issue should really genuinely do is convincing attitudes down south. Now, apparently there are, quite the bulging budget surpluses and all the rest of it. So on. But I wonder how many people would be willing to change aspects of the constitution down south to accommodate a million, unionists.
Well, Pat Leahy in that same article says that there's less firmly objecting to changes. They're more open now than they were a year ago to changes like to the constitution to accommodate unionists. So he sees them as being on the right path. But again, I would say in a way, he's doing a disservice, really. It's good that he's giving us some facts. It's good that people are talking about it, but the baseline to the whole thing must be that people are given a detailed picture of what a united Ireland might look like, whether they're unionist, whether they're nationalist, whether they're Republican. And I'm amazed that bright guys like Leahy and others in Irish Times are avoiding that. And I think they're avoiding it on purpose. It must be. It must be. I also don't see, I'm not quite sure why Sinn Féin hasn't been calling loudly and clearly and consistently for that. Maybe they're waiting their time. Maybe they don't want to spook the horses.
And that is exactly what they're doing. I think, and the Republic particularly, they're riding high. And I think they don't want to spook the horses that we're a one-trick pony type thing, that the only thing we're here for is the United Ireland. They want to sell them that they're a socially progressive party, that they housing, health, progressive taxation, and we're not just about a United Ireland. If they get into government, if they mentioned, here's the and we've talked about this before, if Mary Lou McDonald got into power in the south and Michelle O'Neill got into power in the north, Jude, I think the dynamics could change very, very quickly.
Yeah. Well, no, Mary Lewis said that there'll be a referendum. She expects a referendum this decade. She said that several times. So now, if that matched with the way things were going, although Sinn Féin's having a rocky time in terms of, at the moment, in terms of the opinion polls.
It's starting to read, but there's this, and I've seen it myself. I've seen it in social media. This is a party that just opposes everything for the sake of that. They're now considered. They've almost you going up a hill. They think they've gone down the other. That they've become a party that just opposes everything. And by the way, the tipping point was the riots in Dublin. A lot of people thought that was opportunistic. That calling for the sacking of the Justice Minister and your man within hours of a riot, because a lot of people felt, look, this riot came out of nowhere. It was thugs, and it's the first time it happened. The consensus sort of was, look, if it had happened 2 or 3 times, but this was seemingly spontaneous, and nobody saw it coming. And as Helen McEntee, excuse me, she was on RT one morning, and she got quite annoyed. She says, if anybody got out of bed this morning and thought they knew there was a riot going to happen that night, she says, they should have come forward. She says, nobody came forward. She said, she says, neither politician nor Garda nor anybody else. So her attitude was like, this is opportunistic to have a go.
Well, she may say,
I'd say that's right.
She may say that, Pat, she may say that, but in fact, there were social media from mid-afternoon, which indicated clearly that there was going to be a bunch of guys coming downtown to create bother or to demonstrate or to upset people. So that seems to be missed out on. And secondly, they called for the resignation of McEntee, the Minister for Justice, and for the Garda Commissioner. Because according to the guards themselves, well, they did do a referendum on, and none of them virtually have any faith in Drew Harris. So I think really Sinn Féin probably would have been better if they had said, in the light of the riots, they had said, this is a very worrying situation. We really feel that there should have been somebody in command, somebody should have been in charge here. They should have pointed to the lack of equipment. Remember that we read about guards going into coming in from the countryside and finding that there was no protective gear for them and having to make do and no coordination. Those things, I think Sinn Féin might have been better pointing all that out and letting people draw their own conclusion.
It came across as just a wee bit too opportunistic. Whether they were right or they were wrong. But I think the mood music was, look, wait a minute, these are bad guys. What we don't need now is political infighting. We should all be singing from the same hymn sheet. These are the bad guys. The Gardaí, the politicians, the state, all the political parties should say, look, we've got one enemy, these guys.
I think you've got it, Pat. It's a pity we're not running things, isn't it? I wonder they wouldn't see talent or no talent when they see it. Okay, last one, Pat, I promise you, because I know you want to get back to your sick bed and that hot toddy. The Irish Times, again, my mind's so small that I can only take in the Irish Times. Anyway, the Irish Times said, as an article headed, in 2 of the great liberal democracies, freedom of speech stops at Israel. And they're talking about Germany and, God, I'm trying to remember where was that?
America.
Oh,
America.
Yeah,
America.
yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
what they're saying is, oh yeah, you can talk about anything you like, but once you come to Israel, we don't want to hear. Are you not allowed to criticize Israel if we have any control over you? Would that be a fair summation, or is that excessive criticism?
No, Jude, in fact, my article for the Daily Mirror tomorrow is exactly on that subject. I was reading an article on Saturday, and there's a small town, Sag Harbor. In fact, I think it was in Sag Harbor many years ago. It's on Long Island. Last week, a guy called Steve, I think it's Dorph, Stephen Dorff. He has a big white beard and all, and I think he's Jewish, and he was supposed to play Santa Claus. But anyway, Mr. Dorff, he was invited along to a synagogue. He spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and he was invited. He was contracted to play Santa Claus anyway. He was invited along anyway to his local synagogue, and there was two boys there from the Jewish People's Committee or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he went along expecting a forum where they would debate the whole Hamas Israeli thing. But he says what it really turned out to be, it was less than impartial. What it was a sort of almost a prompt session for how to answer awkward questions. And he says he got annoyed and he started asking these people questions about Israel's role in Gaza, about how they were bombing people to bits and so on and so on. Anyway, after the meeting, he never thought anything more about it. But he says a couple of days later, he got a call from the mayor of Sag Harbor to say his invitation to play Santa had been revoked, etc., etc. And he went, what's this about? And it turned out, because of his comments at the synagogue. So, in other words, you're right to express an opinion on something where 20,000 people are dead, where 22,000 bombs have been dropped in Gaza, where schools, hospitals, refugee centers have been attacked by the Israelis, where they even shot dead 3 of their own people on Saturday, the people, guys who had been hostages, and so on. It's not allowed to be talked about. And Jude, I'm going to wrap this up, but the girl in the Irish Times said in America, she had been, I presume she's of the gay persuasion. She said she had been in Russia where she kept her own sexuality quiet. She had been in various other Middle Eastern countries. But she says it's nothing like what's going on in Germany and America, where you simply cannot speak out. She says that in America, if you say anything other than pro as an Israeli, you're in deep shit. That's really what she said. And she says in Germany, the police absolutely are ruthless. And any pro-Palestinian protest that she says they beat the crap out of, there's heavy police presence and they beat the crap out of any protesters. She says you're not allowed to be pro-Palestine.
Well, you see, that's I'm convinced that the reason Germany is so strongly in favor of Israel, supporting them, is
Yeah,
the fact that they have it on their conscience. They really are still
historical guilt. Yeah.
Terrible, it's a terrible burden to have to bear. The fact that your father or your grandfather was probably involved or assented to the slaughter of Jews. But on the other hand, you're doing a disservice if your way of sort of repenting is to go behind Israel, no matter what Israel does. I was just thinking, Pat, it's quite not totally unlike what we came through in the Troubles. Show me a man or a woman who during the Troubles would have stood up and said, I am a nationalist. I believe firmly in a united Ireland. I really think that the sooner we can get that, the better. People wouldn't have done that, frankly, because they would have been afraid. They could have been killed. Not only would they have, say you were a columnist and you start preaching that line, how long do you think your column would last in the newspaper? Not very long, I think. So it's the same thing with Israel, that it's sort of in place and there's no moving it because of historical reasons.
But here's the point. There's a slight difference in the sense that America is not involved not involved directly in the war. Neither is Germany. This is between Hamas and Israel. Yet these so liberal democracies. Jude, if you're a public figure, if you're a journalist, if you're an academic, I know an academic who was in Derry several years ago, and he told me, and he stood up, he said, one of the quickest way to absolutely bomb your career out of existence is to criticize Israel. Academically, he was a guy who was one of the top universities. He says you just don't criticize Israel. If you do, your career's over. How many media personalities? Your woman, what do you call her? Susan Sarandon, Oscar
Yes.
winning actress.
Yes.
She said her talent agency cancelled her contract because she spoke out in favor of Palestine. Bella Habib, who's one of the top models, her father is Palestinian. She says she has definitely lost contracts in recent times because of her stance on it. And Jude, you look across, it's a form of McCarthyism. Have you ever watched some of the Republican guys? They will not. There's your man, Lindsey Graham was on Fox News on it, and he says, "I don't care. Will they keep bombing Gaza? Did we care when we were bombing Iraq?" He says, "Until Hamas is eradicated, I don't care how many innocent civilians." That's basically what he said.
It's an odd way to justify something, to say, we did the terrible deeds, so let these guys do the terrible deeds as well. It's only be fair, like even-handed.
Yeah. I hear people saying, either the Israeli guy was on the other day saying, "Well, what about Dresden? Did the Allies bomb Dresden?" As if that was okay. That's okay then. And by the way, dropping bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima wasn't okay either. But he seems to say, "Look, just because he's done it." Before we go, I noticed we have only 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I watched last night. Michelle Moan, I think she's a farmer in Scotland or something. She's the lady who got the massive PPE contract from.
Yes. I thought that name was
she was interviewed by Laura Kunsberg. By the way, I think she's the YouTube was actually paid for by our company. But this is a woman, Jude. I enjoyed it so much. This is a woman who got. She was a Tory peer, and when the whole thing about the COVID came out, she was put on a VIP line with direct access to ministers, and she got a contract for 200 million to provide PPE. Someone's was it MediPro or something? I think is the name of the company. Anyway, bottom line of it, apparently it was total crap. But she personally got 29 million from the contract.
I think it was more than that, Pat. I think it was more than that. I think she got about 60.
The contract was worth, the company was supposed to be 200 million, but she personally got 29 million for setting it up.
Yeah.
No, how much more she made. But anyway, bottom line, she was on last night, and a sort of a PR exercise saying, "We did nothing wrong." And I'm going, "Are you for real?" At a time, people were dying. At a time, there was a panic on. People were desperate. You saw a money-making scheme, and you set up, and apparently the stuff was absolute crap. She's now getting sued by the government because they have been exposed to it, not because they were wanting to do it, but her company is now getting sued for 122 million. Government trying to reclaim the money.
Isn't she the woman that has said that she lied to the press earlier on?
She said she lied, but she's done nothing wrong. She said to the press earlier on she had nothing to do with MediPro. I think that's the name of the company, and so on. When she clearly had. But the other thing as well, Jude, it's the bigger issue. She tried to say that we had nothing to do with it. During that whole thing, the COVID thing, the Tory party, the corruption was unbelievable. There were people getting contracts from their muckers in the Tory party, right, left, and centre, and they were trying to. I remember one guy coming on, one of the Tory ministers. We did the job, and we were brilliant. We cut out the middleman and all the rest. He didn't. It was dishonesty. What he basically says, we looked after our friends. They got all the big contracts. And it was like the Wild West. That was the Boris Johnson era when no rules applied.
Well, I tend to have a similar view, but I think maybe I'm a wee bit hard on them, and so are you, because at the time, everybody was so frantic to get this equipment, get these PPE or whatever it was called, so that patients could be treated. They reached towards the nearest person, and if their mate had this stuff, they'd know him or her, and they'd take it from them. Do you not think that's possible?
No, Jude, that's bollocks. Jude, you've been well kind there. A lot of these people, they knew they were total rubbish.
Well, what the alternative wouldn't have been? The alternative would have been to go to somebody else.
Some of the civil servants said they knew from the outset that this was rubbish. That they should have given a contract to somebody about shipping who didn't have any ships. Jesus, Jude, how long does it take to check out? Like, it's not very difficult to work out. Wait a minute, does this boy have a factory? No, he doesn't. So where's he getting? Oh, he's only a middleman for somebody else. So he has to order it somewhere else. No, well, why don't we go directly to the factory concerned rather than going through Michelle Moan, who doesn't seem to. But Michelle, of course, gets 29 million out of it.
Pat, I think that's a cold talking. That's a cold talking. It's not you're not your usual kindly, warm
Yeah.
Santa Claus
No,
self.
no, I saw her on last
No,
night.
I
I thought,
agree with you,
are
Pat.
you,
I agree.
are you taking the piss out of us? She says, okay, I lied, but I didn't do anything wrong. Okay, I got 29 million, but what's the big problem? Okay, I did. By the way, the PPE was crap and all the rest. And by the way, I didn't take advantage of the COVID or the desperation. And why you asked me, but then I was sitting and said, it says, she said she had no connection with MediPro, and then the YouTube video was funded by MediPro.
Sounds like Billy Bunter saying he didn't eat the cake after he's wiped the crumbs from his mouth. Okay,
maybe legally, she has done nothing wrong, but put it like this, it stinks.
She's a bad woman. Okay, right, Pat. All
Oh,
the
that's
best. Thanks
good.
very much.
Bye.
Go back to bed right now.
Good luck.
Right now, get back to
Right.
bed.